Picture this. Millions of Americans tuned in every single week to watch a real police car on their screens. And for more than half the show's run, it was a total fake. And here's the funny part. The clue was hiding in plain sight the entire time. All you had to do was count. Count what? I'll tell you right now. And after this video, you will never watch the old episodes the same way again. In the late 1950s, there was one TV show that basically shaped how an entire country imagined a highway patrolman. Hey, quick question. Which city are you watching this from? Drop it in the comments. Okay, let's keep going. A big man in a fedora barking 10-4 into his radio mic, a sharp turn in a black and white Buick chasing down another bad guy somewhere on a California highway. This was one of the highest rated syndicated shows in the entire country, and it was more than just entertainment. A whole generation of kids grew up and joined the police because of this show.
But here's the irony. Almost none of those viewers ever learned the truth about that car, or about what happened behind the scenes when the real California Highway Patrol simply packed up and left, taking every single one of their vehicles with them. So what did the production do next? It hid in plain sight, in the reruns that are still airing today. And here's the interesting part. Once you learn the one detail to look for, you will physically be unable to unsee it. This is the story of Highway Patrol, the series that ran from 1955 to 1959, made actor Broderick Crawford a star, and turned an ultra-rare police Buick into a full-blown pop culture legend. This was a 1955 Model 68, a car an ordinary citizen simply could not buy. And here's the problem. When Hollywood producers decided to feature this rare car on screen every single week for 4 straight years, that quickly became an issue, because the real California Highway Patrol only backed the show for so long.
Tell me honestly, how do you feel about this show? Do you still watch it today? And once that support dried up, the producers were left alone with a camera, a shooting schedule, and a massive hole they somehow had to hide from millions of viewers. And to understand exactly how they pulled that off, you first need to know what to look for on screen. When Highway Patrol premiered in October 1955, the entire production philosophy came down to one word: authenticity. This wasn't some fantasy popcorn show. The producers deliberately wanted it to feel almost like a documentary. Broderick Crawford played Captain Dan Matthews, and the creators copied the real California Highway Patrol down to the smallest details. The actors' uniforms were exact replicas of the real CHP uniform, patches and insignia included. The only difference was that the word California was removed. And Matthews' radio call sign, 2150, was actually the real badge number of the CHP commissioner at the time, Bernard Caldwell.
And here's the funny part. This obsession with realism is exactly what makes the whole car story so ironic, because Highway Patrol was shot incredibly cheap. Frederick Ziv, the syndication pioneer who created the show, didn't even expect it to survive one full season. The project was basically shoved into a back corner of his production company's schedule just to fill a gap. Every 30-minute episode was shot in about 3 days, on a budget of $20,000 to $25,000, a fraction of what production actually cost. So the whole crew was working flat out, trying to make cheap look expensive and real. And the tricks they used were genuinely clever, and honestly, pretty risky too. TV cameras of that era hated glare, so most productions of the time dulled the paint on their cars and even stripped the shine off the windows just to kill reflections. Highway Patrol was one of the first shows to deliberately leave bright chrome and real paint gloss on screen, simply because it looked more authentic. To deal with window glare, the crew just cracked the windows down a little. To save money on set, the on-screen patrol cars pulled double duty. While a scene was being reset, they turned into mobile generators, powering the crew's equipment between takes. Look closely at the old footage, and you'll spot an extension cord running right off a patrol car, out of frame toward the lighting rig. That's Highway Patrol in a nutshell. A low-budget production fighting with everything it had to look like $1 million. And nowhere was that fight more obvious than with the cars themselves. Early on, the California Highway Patrol actively backed the production. For a show that counted every single dollar, and honestly, those were tough times for a lot of productions, which is really the only way to explain how tight this budget was, this was a gift from heaven. The CHP loaned out its
To save money on set, the on-screen patrol cars pulled double duty. While a scene was being reset, they turned into mobile generators, powering the crew's equipment between takes. Look closely at the old footage, and you'll spot an extension cord running right off a patrol car, out of frame, toward the lighting rig. That's highway patrol in a nutshell. A low-budget production fighting with everything it had to look like $1 million. And honestly, think about that for a second. A prop car, meant to represent law and order, discipline, precision, doubling as an extension cord on wheels between takes. If a modern production tried that, safety inspectors would shut the set down in an hour. But in the mid-1950s, television was still the Wild West. Nobody was writing the rulebook yet, so crews just solved problems with whatever was parked closest. That scrappy, patched-together energy is honestly part of why the show still feels so charming to watch today. It wasn't polished, it was improvised, episode by episode, dollar by dollar. And nowhere was that fight more obvious than with the cars themselves. Early on, the California Highway Patrol actively backed the production. For a show that counted every single dollar, and honestly, those were tough times for a lot of productions, which is really the only way to explain how tight this budget was. This was a gift from heaven. The CHP loaned out its real working patrol cars.
But there was a catch. A real CHP car carried real CHP markings, and legally, a TV show had no right to use them. So the producers simply dressed them up. Fictional show logos were stuck right over the real California Highway Patrol door emblems, and studio prop plates were bolted on top of the real state-issued license plates. If you look closely at those early episodes today, and collectors absolutely do, every once in a while you'll catch a glimpse of a real CHP emblem peeking out from underneath, which means that from the very first season, that police car on screen was actually a real working police car, just wearing a costume. Honestly, that might be the most honest kind of fake there is. Now, this is where the story could have gotten a lot stranger than it looks at first glance. That CHP Buick from the early episodes, the one we've already covered before, was a 1955 model, specifically the Century trim. That car was never officially sold to the public.
On screen, in black and white, it looked fast and genuinely high status. And it's exactly what burned the word Buick into millions of people's minds as the car of the California police. Now, remember this, because it's about to become your main tool for spotting the fake. Buicks from that era had decorative chrome gills on the front fenders, officially called venti-ports. The base model Special had 3 per side. The pricier lines, Century, Super, and Roadmaster, had 4. The real CHP car was a Century, which means it carried 4 ports. Remember that number, 4 holes. Because the exact moment the real CHP cars disappeared from the screen, the number of chrome holes on that fender becomes your lie detector, a tiny fingerprint that quietly reveals the moment the show started cutting corners. In the middle of the 1956 season, everything fell apart. The California Highway Patrol and the show's producers split, and it was ugly. But the series couldn't just pause and wait for things to get sorted out. The CHP pulled its name, its uniforms, and of course its cars from a production that, by its very nature, had to dramatize police work to keep audiences hooked. And that's apparently exactly where the friction started. Over storylines, over how the show portrayed real patrol work. But there's another layer to this story too. The one that had been bothering the real California Highway Patrol from the very first episodes. We'll come back to that separately, because honestly, it might be the strangest part of this whole story. Either way, whatever the real reasons behind the split, the consequences for the production were immediate and brutal. The CHP pulled its support and flatly refused to supply any more cars. Just imagine what that meant for a weekly show built entirely on the idea of authenticity. One week, you've got an entire fleet of real police cars. The next week, mid-season, with more episodes already in production and a schedule that wasn't going to wait for anybody. You've got nothing. Not a single car. And a lead actor who's supposed to be on screen behind the wheel of a patrol car in exactly 3 days. Be honest, were you ever disappointed by this show? Or are you still completely obsessed with it? So the producers did what TV people always do when they're backed into a corner. They improvised. They scrambled to dress up whatever authentic-looking cars they could actually get their hands on in a hurry. They found a few Mercury sedans. And as for the Buick itself, the only thing available through one of the contractors connected to the show was a 1956 Buick Super 2-door hardtop.
You'd think, for the average viewer, a Buick is a Buick. What's the difference? But here's what actually changed. The original on-screen patrol car had been a 2-door sedan from the base trim line. It got replaced with a 4-door hardtop, meaning no frame around the windows, from the far more upscale Riviera line. A heavy, high-status, essentially luxury car, now playing the role of a modest police workhorse. As one writer covering the show later put it perfectly, criminals were now getting cuffed and hauled off in the backseat of a flashy 4-door Riviera, a car considerably nicer than the one they'd just been dragged out of. And here, friends, is where your detection tool finally pays off completely. That replacement, the Super, still carried 4 chrome ports on the fender, so at a glance, everything still looked correct. But this time, the tell wasn't the holes, it was the body itself. 4 doors instead of 2. A frameless hardtop
Instead of a plain sedan, a luxury car playing dress-up as a working police cruiser. By the 1957 season, the producers finally set aside a proper budget and got systematic about the whole problem. If the real California Highway Patrol wasn't handing out cars anymore, fine, they'd just build their own fakes from scratch. The production started ordering brand new cars straight from manufacturers and dressing them to the show's exact spec, right down to light placement and the precise color scheme. They bought a Dodge Coronet, more new Mercurys, and dressed all of it up as Highway Patrol. Technically, these weren't even disguised police cars anymore. They were plain civilian models, cosplaying as police cars. Neat, carefully built replicas, constructed from the ground up to look like the real patrol. In 1957, the details were fairly close to the original, but in 1958, the show swung back toward reality on screen once again. More on that in a moment. By the way, if you're the kind of person who pauses videos to count chrome details on a fender, congratulations. This channel was basically built for you. Subscribe and stick around, because this whole police car shuffle is its own genuinely wild story. Over time, it became clear, the moment the real California Highway Patrol walked away, the entire series basically turned into a parade of imposter cars. Across 4 seasons, the vehicles playing police cars on screen included a 1954 Oldsmobile 88, a 1955 Buick Century, various Ford sedans from different model years, mid-1950s Mercurys, a 1957 Dodge Coronet, and that's not even the complete list. And here's what's genuinely interesting from a storytelling angle. A viewer in the 1950s had zero chance of ever catching any of this. By the way, if you're the kind of person who pauses videos to count chrome details on a fender, congratulations, this channel was basically built for you. Subscribe and stick around, because this whole police car shuffle is its own genuinely wild story. Over time, it became clear. The moment the real California Highway Patrol walked away, the entire series basically turned into a parade of imposter cars. Across 4 seasons, the vehicles playing police cars on screen included a 1954 Oldsmobile 88, a 1955 Buick Century, various Ford sedans from different model years, mid-1950s Mercurys, a 1957 Dodge Coronet, and that's not even the complete list. Think about that for a second. A police force made entirely out of whatever cars happened to be available that particular week. Different badges glued onto different bodies, different port counts, different door counts, all cut together to look like one continuous, believable fleet. In a strange way, that's the real magic trick here. Not any single fake car, but the editing,
The confidence of the actors, the consistent uniforms selling the illusion that nothing had changed at all. And here's what's genuinely interesting from a storytelling angle. A viewer in the 1950s had zero chance of ever catching any of this. There was no pause button, no rewatching, no YouTube video breaking things down frame by frame. People watched the show once, live in syndication, and whatever version of reality they were shown just settled into memory as the truth. We, decades later, get to grab the footage, hit pause, and expose a swap that literally nobody watching at the time could have possibly noticed.
There was no pause button, no rewatching, no YouTube video breaking things down frame by frame. People watched the show once, live in syndication, and whatever version of reality they were shown just settled into memory as the truth. We, decades later, get to grab the footage, hit pause, and expose a swap that literally nobody watching at the time could have possibly noticed. The series ran for 4 seasons and a total of 156 episodes. When Broderick Crawford was later asked why the show ended, he answered exactly the way his character, Captain Dan Matthews, would have. We ran out of crimes. The real reason was a lot more ordinary. Crawford was working on 2 television projects at once. It was physically wearing him down, and at some point, he simply wanted out of the grind.
But the reruns never really stopped. For decades, the show kept airing on television, sometimes right between commercial breaks, with that same opening sequence where Captain Matthews leaps out of his patrol car, hops a guardrail, and runs to a call box, usually stepping out of what is, in fact, a completely different Dodge. So next time you catch Broderick Crawford yelling 10-4 into that mic and swinging a black and white Buick into a sharp turn, take a closer look at the car. Count the chrome ports on the fender. Check the number of doors. Because what you're looking at is either the real, legendary CHP vehicle or one of the imposters that ended up making that car truly famous in the first place through sheer irony.
And honestly, that's the most fascinating part of this entire story. We like to think real and fake are a clean, obvious line. But Highway Patrol shows us something completely different. Sometimes a legend is actually born right at the intersection of the two, where a real uniform gets strapped onto a stranger's car, and a real car hides someone else's license plates behind a prop sign. It's entirely possible the myth of Highway Patrol could never have existed at all if everything about it had been honest from the very start. We tell the stories of police cars that almost everybody has forgotten. Subscribe, hit like, drop your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next episode.